How's Jay Shah's portfolio allocated?
So I would say 95% in equities,
Okay,
right? I'm talking about the investable wealth,
sure.
right? 5% or 3% in adventure capital, which is crypto,
Mm-hmm.
and 2% in gold.
Got it. Zero real estate,
Zero real estate from an investment point of view.
right? And the 95% equity, is it all in India or is it geographically?
So
Uh,
12% between US and China,
okay.
right? And I think so because you're touching upon this, let me try and give you some more flavor as to how maybe people should also look at it,
Hmm.
right? Given access to different investment avenues,
Mhm.
right? People talk about direct equity, mutual funds, PMSs, AIFs,
Mm.
structured products, etc.
Mm.
The underlying is more or less the same,
Right.
right? But you can still break it up into multiple fairly orthogonal investments. So, let me start off with the simplest thing. Why do people say out of 100 units, put some in large, put some in small, put some in mid cap,
Hmm.
right? A lot of people think the reason is because small caps will give a higher return. But if you go back in history and take a 3-year, 5-year rolling return, it's not that small caps are always given a higher return than large caps
Hmm.
to the extent that we perceive it to be, right? But what they've done is taken different paths to get to that 15% number,
Hmm.
right? So if I have large, mid, and small, let's say in equal proportion, the return gets averaged out,
Mhm.
but the risk at a portfolio level will get cancelled
Right.
or negated. So while individually they might have their own idiosyncratic risk,
Mhm.
the portfolio volatility actually reduces.
Hmm.
And then if I have to break down large, mid, and small into or other avenues as well, have a momentum fund, have a growth fund, have a value fund, have a quality fund, have a volatility fund,
Hmm.
have a beta fund, have a contrarian fund. The list can go on,
Yeah.
right? And the idea always should be that look, if I'm adding a fund,
Hmm.
which part of the puzzle it is solving? If I'm adding a stock, how is it different from the portfolio that I have?
Hmm.
If I'm adding an AIF or a PMS or real estate as an example,
Hmm.
what part is it solving?
Right.
Right? And is it solving it for me?
Hmm.
Not because it's solving it for Siddharth or Rohit or whoever it might be. Right? So as an example, I'm sure you all have some ESOPs and equity from your previous companies, right?
Yep.
Which might be a significant part, or even currently you might be getting, right? Now, I don't know about this thing, but we had that discussion that, Jay, look, it forms 40% of my portfolio of
Hmm.
or over my overall wealth. What are the number is it for you guys? And that number is always 20-30% of the conversation, right? So it comes down to where you are comfortable. Now, sitting in your companies, you all have a slightly more inside view, more confident on growth, etc.
Yep.
Right? You say, "Jay, look, I'm very confident with the 30% or 50% or 60% of my wealth,
Mhm.
right? And time to time, you will sell off because you want to buy a house, a car,
Mhm.
some expenses, etc. Right? But that might not work for me,
Makes
right?
sense.
Because I'm sitting on the outside, you're sitting on the inside, working for the
Yep.
company's doing well,
Yep.
have a much more deeper insight.
Hmm.
But I'll say that, look, and let's assume we're talking about Meta,
Hmm.
right? I'll say that, look, I don't understand Meta to the degree you do. I have at max 5% of my wealth in Meta,
Hmm.
right? So what works for you is very different than what will work for me,
Hmm.
right? So I'm an extremely aggressive person,
Hmm.
right? Which is why 95% is always in equity, right? And I know for a fact that at some point it will be 25% down.
Hmm.
There's no doubt in my mind,
Yep.
right? But can I prepare to a degree that I'm comfortable with it? Absolutely.
Hmm.
I know
Makes.
the 3 steps I think I will take, and at least I can say with a degree of confidence now because I've taken them in the past.
Mhm.
So hopefully I will repeat them when markets fall, whenever they do. if
Mm.
they do,
Mm.
right? And that gives me the confidence of being 95% in equity, nothing else. So a simple statistic, right?
Mm.
When markets are lower, they've fallen by 20%.
Mm.
The next 3 years, assuming the assumptions hold true, will give a much higher return than average
Right.
and significantly higher.
Mm.
But I can also tell you less than 10-15% of people will actually put money when markets are down,
Mm.
right? So I'm happy giving away some amount of dry powder returns
Mm.
at, let's call it 6-7%, and putting in the extra amount of money at a probability of a higher return when markets fall.
Mm.
The 95% is the boring stuff that will make. I think I've put in good companies, in
Yeah.
good funds,
Yeah.
whether direct, passive, active. Those are all separate topics.
Mm. Lots to think about on these matters, I think.
Morgan Housel, I think he makes so much sense all the time, right? And even if you go, see, right now he's become famous, but if you've been tracking him for 5 to 6 years, I think everything that he says makes sense,
Yeah.
right? So sure, you have Warren Buffett who's done, you read their letters, uh, and a whole bunch of other people, but he's actually a person who makes a lot of sense and not just fact,
Mm.
right? And if you can implement even 50% of what he's saying, and I hope people don't do that because then you don't need people like me, right? But God's honest truth, if you do 50% of what he's saying, right, I can tell you your portfolio will increase significantly.
Mm. Interesting.
I think last week someone had forwarded something on WhatsApp on patience and the slowness of money or slowness of making money.
Mhm.
And I'll try and send that to you, Rohit. You can maybe forward it to Siddharth.
Yeah.
It just makes so much sense. And a lot of people who've made money have been doing that.
Mm.
Right? This is just explicitly stated in a simple, easy to understand manner.
Yeah.
And if you continue to do that, there is 5 pots of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Mhm.
But you have to go through that entire arc. You have to control your mind, your heart, your family, WhatsApp groups, your behavior, Telegram groups. Someone, is probably making more money than you as well,
Yeah.
right?
All the time.
Right? If those comparisons you can reduce,
Mm.
and I struggle with it too. It's not that I've reached a stage where I'm got them both where look, what I say is great. Emotions are real, markets are real. If I check my portfolio every week, yes, absolutely, right? Do I feel a pinch when I see red? Absolutely, right? But how much of that decision making you can control basis the framework you are comfortable with will determine the next 10-15 years.
Mm.
I think of it this way, and taking one of our very close friend recently told me,
Mm.
how you take care of your body in the 30s will determine your 40s,
Mm.
right? Same for finance. What
Yeah.
you're doing today and the framework that you establish today will determine the next 2 decades.
Right.
If you're not able to stick to it, you'll be all over the place.
Mm.
If you're able to stick to it, you realize, okay, look, this number is done.
Mm.
Now let me try and enjoy, let me balance, let me, you still might be working at Meta,
Yeah.
right? But that equation is out of your head.
Mm. Fair enough. So speaking about frameworks, right, and especially because we try to focus a little more on the NRI experience. So
Sure.
NRIs tend to find themselves in sort of two boats at the same time, right? Like you have your country where you're living and working, and you have your home country, which is India, where you have your family, maybe you have property, or you have previous investments from the time before you moved out of the country. So what is a good framework that you have been advising to your NRI clients, and what kind of thought process should NRIs hold in their mind when they are deciding on
Right.
this 15, 20, 25 year sort of a thinking process?
Absolutely. So I think from an NRI perspective, the basics obviously remain the same,
Hmm.
right? I think the ability to earn a return to a better degree than someone sitting in India in dollars,
Mhm.
right, is much higher,
Mhm.
right? The options which are available to NRIs, let's say I want to participate in a fund based out of Singapore.
Mhm.
And let's say I don't have a international bank account in Singapore. There's
Right.
no way I can give him money or
Mm.
her money,
Mm.
right? So I think that option to be able to say, as Siddharth said, that one of the worries is how do I prepare some dollars
Mhm.
for my kid,
Mm.
right? Who will need it in 20 years,
Mm.
right? Out here sitting in India, I might be targeting a 15% return,
Mhm.
but 4-5% is the rupee depreciation.
Mm.
So I'm generating a $10 return, let's call it. But ideally, would I want to give money to someone in the US, or not US, but let's say a dollar return? Absolutely.
Mm.
Which is why a certain allocation is there, and there's those US tech funds. कि उसमें at least I'll get won't be hit by the depreciation, and it's something where I'm comfortable investing in.
Mhm.
So I would say the basic framework, Rohit, remains the same. I don't think that changes, right? That every piece that you're adding,
Mm.
why is it making sense?
Right.
So, as an example, and we were talking at one point in time, there are lots of REITs in Singapore as well. Singapore real estate market is looking good,
Yep.
right? And you might be investing in those,
Mm.
right? Because adding diversification, etc. But the point I'll always make is that just because someone has given 10% returns or 15% returns
Mm.
doesn't mean it will continue.
Mm.
If you have those 5 reasons which you can establish with a good degree of credibility,
Mm.
right? Saying that these 5 reasons will make the Singapore real estate market do well,
Mhm.
definitely by all means put in money,
Mm.
and you should. So whether you're sitting in Singapore or India, in the US, the UK, wherever it is, I think the entire goal has to continuously be to finding those pockets which are missing in that portfolio.
Mm.
As long as you're able to do that, your portfolio is getting stronger. It doesn't mean that you won't lose money, right? But more of your money will continue to do well across different market cycles.
Right.
And sure, sometimes there might be some bad investments that come along the way,
Sure.
but that's the tuition fees.
Mm.
And as long as we learn from that, whether you are a citizen, an NRI, an Indian, doesn't make that much of a difference, right? Some places,
Mm.
to give an example, one client from who shifted to Denmark,
Mm.
right? So Denmark has a notional tax
Okay.
for investments outside of Denmark. So let's say you made a
Okay.
50% gain on your India mutual funds,
Mm.
right? Not redeemed. You still have to pay a 35% tax on that,
Wow.
right?
Well.
So in those cases, you want that India participation,
Mhm.
but you don't want to pay 35% tax when you're not redeemed because you have to remove it from somewhere
Yeah.
and pay up.
Yeah.
I think country of residence makes a big difference. Obviously, if you are in
Mm.
Dubai and Singapore, very similar in terms of taxation per se, right?
Mm.
You're sitting fine on investment,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes it makes sense to just call the base case sitting and putting it in a India ETF or a MSCI India. If you want participation in India, for a lot of people who can take risk,
Mm.
if you can identify good funds, chasing a higher alpha, a higher return is still possible in a country like India,
Mm.
right? There's so many opportunities, you know, whether you call it middle class, whether you call it upper middle class, whether you call it higher class, there's opportunity everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone that you talk to is doing different business. And on that note, one of my very recent clients
Mhm.
who does business with China, right? He
Mhm.
said, "Hey, look, we are importing twice the amount that we were importing 2 years back. China is not slowing down,
Mhm.
right? So all these things have to be sort of fitted in
Mhm.
into what you're comfortable with and what you understand.
Yeah, I think what I have learned from my experience, both like working with you and just trying my hands at taking investment decisions on my own, if I have a full time job, the best ROI that I can generate is by being really good at that job and then sort of outsourcing a lot of this wisdom and this experience to people who are experts in this field, such as yourself, right? And
Okay.
the reason why I specifically call that out is some of the insights that you have shared in the last several minutes around China exports, gold, silver, and real estate. As a person who is not spending my entire day thinking about it or reading about it or talking to people in the industry about this, it is too overwhelming for me to keep track of all of these things and then come up with a framework which is sensible and is balanced and is aligned with what I want in my life
Sure.
over many years and all those things. But if I can be really, really good at my job and I can kind of get that security that I'm so good at my job that I'm confident that it'll continue and I'll continue getting more money and bonuses and promotions and all those things, like that is the highest ROI that I can control and generate. And
Sure.
then sort of rely on other experts in this field to give me that 12, 13, 15% over a 20, 25-year time horizon. What do you
So
think?
the idea is to enable clients,
Mhm.
right? By giving them as much information as possible to the extent that I have it,
Mm.
right? And in fact, we encourage everyone that we talk to, whether they become our clients or don't become our clients, that please always don't take away optionality from yourself,
Mm.
right? So if let's say you're worth 100 units of wealth,
Yeah.
right? First determine whether it's me or talking to anybody else that you're planning to give money to. Determine whether you want to keep 15% to yourself, 20%, 50%, 60%, or even 5% with yourself,
Mhm.
right? Because the last thing I would want or any advisor would want is for the potential client to second guess,
Mm.
right? So what I would tell every client is that, look, keep one portion where you are doing things outside of me. So if someone tells you buy Nvidia, please go ahead and buy Nvidia. If someone tells you buy fund ABC,
Mm.
please go ahead and buy fund ABC, right?
Right.
That way, either in 4 or 5 years, you'll come back and say, I think I can do better than Jai, as an
Mm.
example,
Mhm.
which is great, right? Because then you're obviously saving money,
Yep.
right? Or you'll come back and say, look, I tried it for 4 or 5 years. I had no idea what I was doing. I made some money, but मेरे से नहीं होगा because I have a day job which is taking 15 hours a day,
Mm.
right? And both are a great result for me,
Mm.
right? Because I don't want you to feel that I've not been able to do a good job for you,
Right.
right? And that can only happen if you try on your own
Mhm.
across multiple aspects. And as you said, if you have a good sounding board,
Mm.
always a certain portion should be on your own,
Yeah.
right? If someone, a client comes and tells me, "Jai, I don't need you," that's fantastic,
Mm.
right? The business should not be about extracting that last percentage out of what Rohit or Siddharth can give me,
Right.
right? It should be longer term. How do I enable Rohit to do it on his own?
Mm.
And actually, if I do that, and as counterintuitive as it sounds, there's a very good chance you won't.
Mm.
But I have to enable you to do that.
Yeah.
I have to give you that optionality. आप decide कर लो अभी. I've given you all the tools. I've tried to explain. You've been with us for 4, 5, 10, whatever, whenever you decide to go on your own. And if I can do that, पैसा बन जाएगा, right? But I think that's more important to do for clients.
Yeah.
Like, how
Awesome.
transparent can you be?
I think we have, both Siddharth and myself have learned a lot. This sort of brings us towards the
Absolutely.
end of our discussion today. But Jay, I hope you had a good time talking to us. We would love
I
to
did. I
have
did.
you again on the show at some point soon and continue this conversation. I also know that you are a content creator. You have your own YouTube channel. Do you want to maybe very quickly talk about where people can find some of your wisdom, and if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
So I honestly don't know how to search for One Tree Hill, but I think if you type in One Tree Hill in YouTube, it should hopefully throw something up.
Okay.
I generally land up creating shorts rather than long form videos. It's unfortunately not as consistent as I would like to be, not as consistent as you guys are. But whenever I get some idea, I try and just speak a minute on it, at least to give a gist of what I'm thinking. But yeah, you can probably type in One Tree Hill in YouTube, on Instagram. We're not so much on Twitter. But yeah, so if you find it useful, please subscribe.
We'll link the YouTube channel and the Instagram channel in the show
Sure,
notes.
sure,
Shouldn't be
sure.
a problem.
Awesome. And if people want to kind of get in touch with you personally, one to one, for any discussions, consultations, what's the best place to do that?
Email.
Email. Cool.
Yeah, I'm still not in the on the Instagram messaging app phase where I don't land up again. It's something that I've been trying to change to become sort of more in front of the market. But as I said, comes down to comfort, comes down to what you're comfortable with. And at the end of the day, fairly confident as at some level someone wants to reach me,
They'll
they'll
figure
find
out
us
a
or
way.
we'll find them.
Yeah.
Right? Might take some time, but something like this will definitely help. So if there's someone who wants to reach out, more than happy to have a conversation and see where that goes.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. I think
Thank
this
you
was
guys. Thank you,
me
Siddharth. Thank you,
personally
Rohit.
wonderful, wonderful conversation today. Learned a lot. Would love to
Super.
have you again. And to our audiences, thank you for giving all your love and attention. If you have any questions, feel free to throw those in the comments. We would love to try and address as many of those as we can. If you have ideas for other topics and other kind of episodes that you would like to see, let us know. We would love to do those as well. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back again with another amazing episode very soon. Thanks.